Good afternoon. I'm going to invite those who can hear my voice out in the hallway, if you can't, to come on in so that we can begin this afternoon. I'm Dr. Karen Wiseman. I am the Stemfley Fulcomer Professor of Homiletics here at ULS. And I had an experience today that maybe some of you have had at other times in your life and maybe just today. I fangirled one of my favorite people. And I say that maybe fan person, I'm not sure, but I love the Naked Pastor and love what he does. And when I saw him as he got out of the car today, my heart sort of beat a little bit faster because I was in the presence of who I believe is one of the great voices of our generation around inclusion and about making the world a better place through art. Let me tell you just a couple of things. So as a queer kid growing up in cow towns in West Texas, there was no narrative coming from anywhere, from the church, school, society, that affirmed who I was. It was all condemnation. There was no Google to find a manual for growing up gay. There was not a bookstore in my town that had anything remotely associated with that. When I went to college, when I began to look for those things, I was sent to a queer bookstore that you had to have a password to give at the little gate window in the store to get in because they were so just desperate to make sure that they stayed anonymous as much as they possibly can. And one of the things I love about David Hayward is that he bridges a lot of those gaps for folks. I first encountered him on my Facebook feed. He may show it later, but I saw a cartoon, and there was literally Jesus with a rainbow sheep around his shoulders, and the 99 standing to the side going, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not right. He's not lost. We kicked him out. And it came around the time that I, too, had made a decision to leave my denomination or be put on church trial for coming out and marrying my wife. That cartoon was impactful for me. And one of the things I love about him is he's honest about his journey. Went to seminary, had all these beliefs and assumptions and all of this, interpretive lens that he was looking at theology and the Bible. And seminary did with him what it is supposed to do. It flipped all that, it deconstructed it, it challenged it, it affirmed it, it did all kinds of things for him to begin to move out of where he was into who he was called to be. Lifelong artist that became a cartoonist and sort of embracing and talking about the world of theology and the church. And he said, I'm going to do a cartoon every day. That was 16 years ago. And he's still doing a cartoon every day. And you can sign up for the Naked Pastor email list, as I have, and you can get that information. You can buy one of his books. You can do all kinds of stuff. But let me tell you, a picture does the work of 1,000 words often. But for me and many of my queer siblings, the fact that we can see that visible evidence of inclusion and grace and love and acceptance on our feed, on our Facebook, or on Twitter, or wherever we are, it gives me life. And so as a person who is queer and sees the work that you do as a way to even enhance my teaching as I share some of those cartoons in my class, I thank you so much. I welcome you to ULS, and we're excited to hear you speak.
Well, thank you so much. I'm humbled and I'm very honored by that. And a picture's worth 1,000 words. I'll admit not all my pictures are worth 1,000 words. But I mean, my latest book, Flip It Like This, is the one that's out on the tables that I can sign for you if you want. The publisher asked if I could do a best of cartoon book, and I like to have up to this point about 4,500 cartoons in my arsenal. And they wanted it boiled down to about 130, and that was really, really, really difficult. But I did make that challenge to myself way back in 2005 or 6. I'm going to try and draw a cartoon every day until I run out of ideas. I thought I would last a month, and here I am still going. And yeah, it's quite a story. So thanks so much for having me here. I'm having such a good time and meeting such wonderful people. And Martin, thanks so much for all the care that you've shown me. And I'm just being treated so well. It reminds me of when I was a pastor in church days. So I appreciate that. I appreciate being here. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you why I'm the naked pastor, just to get that out of the way. Back in 2005, I had a blog, a pastor's blog. I was a real pastor back then. And at that point, it was like davidhayward.ca, which stands for Canada. And that was kind of boring. And then I came up with Church Pundit, and that sounded really kind of, arrogant, to be honest. And I was just Googling around looking for what would be a good name, and I thought, well, there's, at that time, Naked Chef, Naked Archaeologist, Naked Truth, all was kind of going on at that time. So I thought, well, Naked Pastor, kind of, because I wanted to sort of rip back the veil and let people see what really goes on in the ministry and really goes on in the church. I wanted to be really vulnerable and open and honest and real and raw. So Naked Pastor, that's what that means. And that's all that means. I do have a lot of people who are, offended by the name, and I've struggled with it on and off, but it seems to work. And it's here now, Naked Pastor. And but I do want to give you a little recommendation. If you are Googling Naked Pastor, make sure it's one word. Because if you Google 2 words, you're going to see things you can't unsee. So, unless that's your thing. But, oh, my notes. So, I wanted to talk today about the arts and how powerful they are to convey truth, and how they can play a prophetic role in our lives. And I'm not just talking Christian art, I'm talking about art in general, that it has a certain quality to it that I found breaks through all kinds of barriers that we might have set up in our minds and in our hearts. Art can bypass our rationale and go straight for the emotions, for example. And I find that a very effective way to communicate and to convey truth. And that's how art has worked in my life. I grew up in a home where my dad, even though he was a cop full-time, he was a painter on the side. And so I was around art all the time. We had original art hanging in our homes, and I just grew up drawing and painting, and so art was very much a part of my life. Music was a part of my life. Watching movies, my mom's a movie buff. We watched, I don't know how many movies, so just being surrounded by artistic expression, but also art as a way of communicating. And so I just sort of, even though I went to Bible college as a music major, I switched to Bible after I met Lisa. She had an influence on my life. So I switched to Bible and theology, ended up going to seminary. I started my PhD in New Testament theology. We got pregnant, we got derailed there, and I ended up going into the ministry, where I served the church for about 30 years as a pastor. But all the while, though, I was drawing on the side. And then, so in 2005, when I started nakedpastor.com and was blogging about ministry and the church and all that, at that time, I was kind of flying under the radar because I just started blogging. But when I started my cartoons, though, something happened. And it started taking off. And it started getting me in trouble. to the point where my denomination at the time, I got the phone call, and they suggested that I run everything through them first, and I knew my time was up. That was in 2009, and in 2010 I ended up leaving the local church professional clerical ministry. Some argue I'm still in ministry. I don't know. That's up to you to decide. But it looks very different now, and I do everything online, except things like this. So here is one of my cartoons. I call it Overturning, and it's based on. I just wanted to show that because that might be one of my cartoons that you're familiar with. It's one of my most popular. And I just wanted to show a sort of a cartoon that had it kind of like a Matrix superhero feel to it, where Jesus is just like overturning the tables of the money changers in the temple. And for me, that stands for a prophetic act of justice, defending the marginalized and defending the poor. And that to me, I just love it because it just has the action and the drama and all that. And I take that as a prophetic act. And so I just, a lot of people love that image, and, prints are going around the world. And so I wanted to put that up there just as an intro. But let me see if I got this right. I hardly ever do this, so please be patient. Let me see. What do I do next? Here. There we go. So years ago, I went to seminary in Boston, Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. And one day I went to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and this painting by Merson was hanging. And it was in a kind of like tucked away. And I got mesmerized by this painting. It's called Flight to Egypt. So it's maybe hard to see because it's bright in here. But you can see Mary with baby Jesus in the arms of the Sphinx, right? You can see that? And can you see Joseph sleeping on the ground? You can't see that? Can somebody turn the lights off just for a moment? Or are they controlled in head office? There we go. In the middle, there's Joseph sleeping. And then you see the donkey. The donkey on the far right, and then a very thin ribbon of smoke coming up from the fire. I was mesmerized by that painting. Mesmerized. And my wife and our friends were going around. They were continuing going around the museum. And I just stood there in front of this painting. It was speaking to me because I'd already suspected the gospel wasn't just for Christians, that the good news is for everyone. And this painting pictured that for me. I guess you can turn them back on if you like. Where the light shines in the arms of the Sphinx, right? Egypt stands for the enemy often in the Bible, right? So, but that the gospel was shining there in a foreign land in the arms of the Sphinx. And I don't know, it opened my heart and my mind in a very, very powerful and emotional way that the gospel isn't in the center, it's everywhere. Everywhere center. And everybody can share it. So that for me was a profound, life-changing moment. So much so that I bought a print of it and it's hanging in my house. And just to remind me of that moment that where art changed my mind, transformed me, the way I think about the gospel or the good news or inclusion. I'm a bunny trail kind of guy. I keep going down bunny trail. But inclusion, I even have, when somebody says we're going to allow women to get ordained, to me there's a problem with that kind of talk because you are centering yourself and you're allowing, it's like you have the power to permit. You see what I mean? And so just this painting that shattered that they weren't, this picture isn't showing how Egypt is included, but how the gospel's everywhere, and that includes Egypt. You see what I mean? There's a difference. And so it just had such a profound effect on my life, and I realized in 2005 or 6, I paint as well, like landscape watercolors, but I started including cartoons because I wanted to convey as much as I could in as few words as possible, and hopefully in one frame, the truth of what I felt was true. And so for me, the gold standard for a cartoon is the New Yorker. Do you know the New Yorker cartoons? That for me is the gold standard. And if one day the New Yorker says, can you do a cartoon? I'll be done. But that's the gold standard for me, a New Yorker cartoon. So I try the same thing. I try to keep it black and white, very simple, one frame, few words as possible. And so I just started drawing these cartoons, and they started getting noticed, and people started sharing them, and here we are. And this is the first, what some of my readers called my first gay cartoon. Sorry, Jesus, I think I'm gay. And Jesus said, dude, relax. I knew that long before you did. And people just love that cartoon because there's something about, as you mentioned, seeing it in a picture. Rather than the words only, but to see it in a picture. It just does something where you can maybe imagine it in your own mind, right? You see it, you can imagine it, and therefore it can be real. Also, before I go on, I don't mind being interrupted. If anybody has a question or a comment, a nice one, you can feel free to interject. Oh, look at the date on that, 2012. So that was a little while ago. And that's when things started to really get interesting. So, and here's another one you might recognize, Eraser, where everybody's got their fat pencils drawing lines of separation between each other, but Jesus is erasing the lines. So I like that one as well. Have any of you here read the book, it just came out recently, Johann Hari's book, Stolen Focus? You've read that? He goes on he's a journalist, Dutch journalist. He goes on a sabbatical, a social media sabbatical, maybe internet sabbatical, where no internet for like months. He goes to Cape Canaveral or somewhere, Cape Cod, somewhere, and just gets a cottage and goes offline. And he just documents his story, but he also writes about his conclusions. But one of the things he talked about was some research has been done where they've come to discover that people who read fiction are generally more empathetic. Because when you're reading fiction, you kind of enter into the shoes of that person. You're in their head. You're in their heart. You kind of feel what they feel. And so he felt reading fiction and watching film or whatever is really important in developing our empathy. So for example, I have friends who are, for example, trans, and I know families of trans kids and et cetera, et cetera. And I've talked with trans people. I have trans friends, as I said, but I just finished reading Elliot Page's book, Page Boy, where you get into, I mean, you're feeling his struggle of coming out. And if you don't develop empathy from that, you might need therapy, you know? So I think that's why I've stuck with art and with my cartoons and so on, because it's like with this one I previously showed you. I don't know how many gay people have approached me and saying, this image changed my life, because they felt it. They felt the love. And I have people who used to be homophobic who said that this picture changed their life because they realized, hey, of course Jesus loves everybody, you know, kind of thing.
Question. The Jesus there looked conventionally feminine to me.
That's accidental, but, you know, it's, yeah, sure. That's the cool thing about art. You know, oh, oops, sorry. That's the cool thing about art is it can mean anything to anybody. And yeah, I've had people say about a cartoon, hey, did you realize? And I'm like, no, I didn't realize that, but cool. So what I want to talk about and how, like people say, what are you about? What are your cartoons about? What's the thread that pulls it all together? I think for me, and I'm just in the middle of this, so I'm going to have a difficult time articulating it. But I think what I am trying to talk about is how I think a major theme of the Bible, the Hebrew scriptures, the Christian scriptures, we're talking about, and Jesus and so on, is the decentering of power and privilege and the centering of the marginalized and the weak and the poor, etc. I think that's a huge, huge, huge theme of the scripture and the life of Jesus. That sometimes it's explicit and sometimes it's not, but it's always there. And so that's why my cartoons are, I think most of them are along this theme of decentering power and privilege and centering those who have normally been marginalized. So this cartoon, for example, is a centering of a gay person, which a gay person and friends of gay people will be encouraged and affirmed by, but those who are, say, homophobic and have centered themselves will find this very offensive because it implies that they are wrong and that centering yourself is a bad move, a dangerous move, and it's going to have consequences. So one of the things I'm very, some people might call my cartoons prophetic or whatever, but I never call myself prophetic. Don't call yourself prophetic. Don't call yourself a prophet. I think it's dangerous. Because I think a prophet is somebody who is a spokesperson for God. And I don't think any of us should presume to do that. If other people call you a prophet, that's okay. But if you call yourself a prophet, yellow lights go off for me. Maybe sometimes red lights, depending how blatant you are in your profession. But also it's dangerous to be a prophet. We all know what happens to the prophets. Yeah, they get stoned in their hometown or driven out. So I'm very cautious. So for me, what it's about, it's not being a prophet or being prophetic or anything like that. And we all know, like, there's two two ways of being a prophet. One is foretelling, where you tell the future. Foretelling, where you tell the truth. And that's what I try to do, is I just try to tell what I think is true. And just being honest, being naked, vulnerable, authentic, real, truthful. That to me is what I try to do. And how we begin that journey is we have to start being honest with ourselves. So for me to be honest and to be able to tell the truth, I have to be somewhat honest and tell the truth about myself. I have to start with myself. And I have to deal with my issues before I deal with yours. Right? The old log in my eye thing, right? That's just basic. That's not just a Christian principle. That's not a spiritual principle. That's a human principle. That's a mental health principle. That's a personal spiritual growth or personal growth issue that we need to be self-aware and be able to see where our hang-ups are and where our presumptions and assumptions are and where our biases are and where our prejudices are and fears, all those things. And so the only way that I can address anything out there is by first addressing it in my own heart. And what I have found that when I find an issue with myself, which is, happens a lot, I'm open and honest about it. And so then rather than me preaching against that out there, I highlight what's going on in my own heart. And people observe and learn from it, hopefully. So that to me is something that's very, very basic to what I do, is I'm the naked pastor. I'm going to be honest and real, including about my own journey, and maybe you'll learn from it, So as I go, I got to remember to flip through some cartoons. I have a few to share with you. And just, even though a lot of these are like, whew, that's heavy, at the end, I promise you, I've got about a dozen funny ones for you. I think they're funny. But before you do, the thing about prophets, in the Old Testament, for example, the Hebrew Scriptures, the prophets never centered themselves, right? And in the New Testament, we see what happens when people center themselves. So you have people like Jeremiah, who the king brought in. The king had his own prophets on the payroll, literally. He brought them all in, and they all told him what they thought. And he's like, yeah, I don't know if I trust these guys. I'm paying them. So he calls for Jeremiah, who's not on the payroll. And Jeremiah tells him the truth. And that's the last, that's the last we hear of Jeremiah. Literally. He's sent into exile, and we don't hear from him again. And that's a prophet. Somebody who doesn't center themselves. Last night, heard a great sermon. Moses. Who am I to set Israel free from Egypt? That is a prophetic attitude. Who am I? And then you continue through the Hebrew Scriptures. You get to Mary's Magnificat, where the high will be brought low and the low will be brought high. In the ministry of Jesus, constantly Jesus is decentering the powerful and the privileged and centering the marginalized. The vineyard, we just heard a message on that, where the people who were working all day got a salary, but the people who came in halfway through got the same salary. And the people, it's because they were centered. And the people who were at the center felt decentered and threatened and resentful. You know, the parable of the feast, where nobody could come. They were too busy. So Jesus said, go out everywhere, find anybody who will come to the feast. We're not going to waste this food, just anybody. That decentering of the powerful and the privileged, and the centering of the marginalized. We could go on and on. You know, the prodigal of the lost son, where the eldest son was decentered, and he was resentful of it. It's because those at the center, the powerful and the privileged, feel threatened when the marginalized are centered. But the marginalized people I know don't want to decenter the centered. They want to share the center, right? But those at power and privilege at the center feel threatened. And so we see that theme all the way, you know, including Barnabas going to Antioch and saying, hey, the Holy Spirit's up here. And they're like, no way, impossible. Impossible, can't be. Or Stephen's speech before he was stoned. Peter's speech talking all about God showing up in Egypt and in the desert and in the wilderness and on this Mount Horeb and all these other places besides the center. It got him killed. So I think that's a powerful theme, very powerful theme. And I hope my cartoons promote that. Okay, let me show you, eraser. Yeah, this guy's just fishing for the truth. Very relaxed in his boat. And he's got a little question mark for bait. I don't know if you can see that. And he has no idea what's about to happen. This was my experience. My deconstruction of my beliefs and my transformation started in seminary, actually, when I was getting ready for graduation ceremony, and literally the end of my MA, and I'm standing there in our apartment with my graduation robe on and freaking out, because all of a sudden I wasn't sure the scriptures were as inspired as I thought they were, or in the same way. I was losing it, literally losing it. And Lisa was like, you've got to go to graduation. and that's where it began. That one little question unraveled everything. It was like I hooked onto a big, massive white shark. And before his theological breakthrough, and then after his theological breakthrough. So this is really a reflection of my journey. I remember reading a book by an Eastern philosopher. I don't know if you've heard of him, Krishnamurti. And it was just a tiny little book I saw in a used bookstore called The Urgency of Change. And I was reading through that book, and I was, again, devastated. Because he said something in there like, the brain's main function is to protect the organism. I remember feeling my heart just sink into my stomach, realizing, and another saying he has is, the word is not the thing, or the idea, the thought is not the thing. And for me, I was young, I was in my 20s, and for me to realize that my thoughts about God aren't God, it killed me. I didn't know where to go from there. It was like a nuclear bomb went off in the middle of my theology and leveled everything. And I didn't know what to do after that. And I drew this eventually, where my idea of God is like this big, and then you have a big breakthrough, and your idea of God is this big now. But that's still not God. That really upset me. Yeah, this trying to get God into his theology box. I think that's an honest picture about what all of us do. It's not, we all do it. It's realizing that we do it is where real change can occur. Our thoughts about God, and then God is outside of that. Or maybe that's not totally fair. Maybe God is the whole thing, you know? Realizing my theology could actually hold me back from a relationship with the divine, right? Does anybody else here identify with that? You don't need to raise your hand. Oh, you're in trouble. You know POV, point of view? So this is this is a picture of me, except I'm not bolding. This is a picture of me, and of many of you, where you can't help but read the Bible through your point of view. We can't help it. And it's knowing that, though. Just knowing that is where true discernment can begin. This cartoon really upsets a lot of people. The Bible plus my interpretation is my interpretation. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a question?
With 4,500 or so cartoons, do you find that you spend certain amounts of time kind of on a particular theme? Not intentionally, but as you are working through it, like noticing the dates on some of these, you know, the 2010 where you sort of like, oh, I'm working through this thing.
Yeah.
2015, I'm working through this thing, and I've got a bunch of cartoons on this.
Right. So the question is, do I work on themes? Do I intentionally, say, talk about Bible and interpretation for a week or two, or am I dealing with something personal in my life and I just sort of focus on that for several days in a row or whatever? Yes to both. Yeah. I have somebody who helps me, kind of like on my team, who really, really wants me to work on themes, like for 1 or 2 weeks. But I, being an artist, I like to get up in the morning and just feel my feels and draw what I feel like that day. And she's very much a business, online social media expert. And, but I just love getting up and, onto the page. And you notice the date around 2010 and so on many of these interpretation cartoons. That's pretty true. But I still go back to this as well. Because, so for example, when I post a lot of my doesn't time fly? When I post my LGBTQIA plus cartoons, inevitably somebody or many will say, but the Bible clearly says, and immediately I can show them this and says, but the Bible really doesn't clearly say. You might think the Bible clearly says, but that's your thinking. That's not necessarily the Bible clearly saying, as well as all the research going on into what does the Bible clearly say about LGBTQIA+, right? But you can't just say the Bible clearly says anymore. I don't think you can say that. The difference between you and me is you use Scripture to determine what love means, and I use love to determine what Scripture means. We're talking about hermeneutics. These are two basic postures, I guess, or approaches to Scripture, hermeneutics or whatever. For me, what I've seen, and even in my own life, where you comb the Scriptures, hoping to find what it means, or to figure out what does love mean? What's the definition of love? And who does it include and who does it exclude? Or you approach the Scripture with the eyes of love and you discern its meaning otherwise. I mean, we all know Luther launched a whole new hermeneutic saved through grace by faith. Is that right? And that's a whole hermeneutical approach to the scriptures, or seeing Christ on every page like a manger. That's a hermeneutic. I'm you know, and hermeneutics go through revolutions, and I'm starting to think maybe a newer hermeneutic that includes all that, and I think is an expression of love, is the decentering of the power and the privilege, and the centering of the weak and marginalized. I think that's a powerful hermeneutic that includes love, but it also includes justice as its expression. Because love is just love without policy. It needs policy. It needs expression. It needs to be done, right? And yeah, I'll keep going. This is another one of my more popular cartoons where I realized, you know, serving a denomination, serving a congregation, serving my audience out there, serving my own fantasy of who I am, all these things were locking me in and preventing me from being my true self, my authentic self. And just that, for me, that was a powerful image of people's expectations behaving like bars to my cage. Just seeing that, realizing that, was when I started to dissemble that cage. And that's where it begins. A lot of us, maybe for most of our lives, and a lot of people out there never realize that they're in a cage. Because it's quite comfortable and secure. Because it also keeps things out. But realizing that is when we can start to break free. This is another one from around that time. I'm sorry, people, there's been a change. I can no longer help you find, but I promise I can help you seek. Oh, here's one of my funny ones. Although it applies. Yeah, that one was fun. Here's another popular one of mine. The decentering of men is the hottest issue when I post. It causes the most anger. And I'm alarmed. I would have thought the LGBTQIA plus cartoons were. For some reason, they're not. But when you challenge the centering of men, it goes ballistic. It goes crazy. And here's one of them. So, ladies, thanks for being the first to witness and report the resurrection, and we'll take it from here. Yes.
This was the cartoon that like made me fall in love with your work. So like, thank you, because as a woman in ministry, it's like this that I hold and remember every time. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah, but isn't that strange, though? And the thing is, like most of the women I know, there are some, but most of the women I know don't want to take the center and abolish men or eliminate men. They feel it needs to be shared. And that's all. But for some reason, men feel threatened. And so they quote all kinds of scriptures and come up with all kinds of studies. And, you know, it really goes crazy when I post a cartoon like this. I'm trying to cut some stuff out.
More about how it goes crazy. And you get threatening emails?
Oh, yeah, I get threatening emails and I get messages on, and I get comments on the cartoon post in Instagram or whatever. So what I do is when I get a message that's hateful, if it's really nasty, I just delete it. If it's kind of funny, I'll share it. I was showing Martin some of my funny ones. Let me see if I can find, like this one here. That, I find that funny. Oh yeah, somebody on Twitter posted a bunch of pastors to avoid, and this person commented, "We need to include naked pastor and his colleagues. There's no end to their blasphemy." And you know, that I find those kind of things funny. But to that point, I got to stay where the mic is. I am beyond debate when it comes to LGBTQIA reality and women, BIPOC, you name it. I'm beyond debate. I don't argue about the rights of women, or I don't argue about is it biblical or not to be gay, and I don't argue about that. We're beyond that. I assume this is the new reality. There are people arguing about that. They're gifted at it. They can do it. What I'm interested in is providing safe places for these people to gather online, so that when somebody comes on and starts preaching anti-women or anti-LGBTQIA or whatever, delete. I don't care. We're not arguing about it. We just, in this community, in this space, we assume it's fine. Everybody's okay. And it makes people angry. Oh, you say you include everybody, but you won't include me. No, you're the one who's excluding yourself by saying, I want to be a part of this, but not if there's gay people here. You're the one who's excluding yourself. And so when somebody comes on with a hateful comment, I delete it as fast as I can, and I have a couple people helping me. Pardon me? You don't feel threatened by that? I don't personally feel threatened by that. The community does, though. And a gay person or a trans person or a woman or a person of color or whatever is on there, and they're hearing the same old stuff they've heard out there. I don't want to be here either. So as fast as I can, I delete that hateful comment to make that place feel as safe as possible. That's just what you do. I mean, it's okay to dump your garbage in your living room, but don't dump your garbage in my living room with my guests here. Dump your garbage in your own living room, not here. And we're trying to provide a safe, warm, and safe place for people who have for so long felt threatened and marginalized and rejected. And so this is what this space is about. And it works. And I think if more of us did that, made those safe spaces rather than saying, oh, we got to allow everybody to have a voice. The bullies always win. They always win when you let them have a voice or when you let them use their muscle. They will always win because violence just has that power. And so I try to prevent that from happening. I do get some stuff that expresses violence towards me and my family, and that gets scary, and there's been a couple times I had to make a report, but usually it's against them, and I just delete it. If they persist, I block them.
I just raised that question in part because we see this prevalence more in society. Even someone as conservative as Mitt Romney, probably is retiring in part, well, maybe because of his age, as he said, but I think he spends $5,000 a month on security for his family and himself. And, this is, for all those of us who are older, this is really kind of a new phenomenon to think that that kind of threat in a latent sort of way exists, but not always latent.
Yeah. That's me. Did I turn that off?
Yep, and hit the on button. It may take a few minutes, it has to cool down now. The other screen's on.
I accidentally hit a button with my thumb. See, that's my life. That's the way my life is. I always accidentally push the wrong button. So the off button is blinking. Should I turn the on button on?
Yeah, just press on, it may take a few minutes before it comes up.
I'm sorry. You can still see that one, right? Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll show you more cartoons, and we can wrap it up. This one is one of my most upsetting cartoons out there for many people, and also one of my most encouraging. Sorry, but you're just not welcome here, the sheep say to the rainbow sheep. And then Jesus leaves with the rainbow sheep, and they go, hey, where'd Jesus go? Oh. Here's the thing. It's okay to decenter LGBTQIA people. But as soon as you decenter a straight person, things go, they get violent. They go hateful, angry. They don't see the hypocrisy of that. Do you know what I mean? So Jesus is choosing to center himself with the marginalized, and that just drives people insane. Some people, not you. I drew this after the last denomination I was in. Were having meetings about whether or not they should be affirming. And it took years. I knew where this was going. And then they finally decided. I left the ministry when they were in the middle of those deliberations. And they ended up voting to not be affirming. And so I drew this picture. How, you know, for those who are centered, they've got all the comforts. There's no rush. Whereas those who are waiting for inclusion, they're waiting outside in the cold. You know, it's like we got to get that. Oh, this is another one that drives some people nuts. All sheep matter. And Jesus is going after that one. This was picked up by the Black Lives Matter movement and shared all over the place. And, you know, I think I'm just drawing a pretty accurate picture of the parable. But it drives people crazy. Oh, Martin mentioned this one, so I thought I would include it. The church and Jesus over the years. So the church has centered itself. Where are all the important people? This one, I drew this for a Christmas when I was still a pastor. And it dawned on me when I was preaching that all the important people weren't there. There were animals, foreigners, a baby, straw, manure, nobodies, Mary and Joseph, you know, more animals, unclean, the shepherds. I think that's a pretty accurate nativity scene. But doesn't that, you know, I could preach a half-hour sermon on that topic, but to see it in a picture, it's quicker. Oh, this is my Left Behind drawing. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I was a teenager, the whole Left Behind series was huge. And I literally feared for my life many times, coming home to an empty house, sure that my mom and dad had been raptured. So I thought I'd get a little cheeky about it. And okay, I'm finishing up now. These are my funny ones. Wait, you forgot your ears, the church. Because does the church listen? We just heard about that this morning, right? Sinner. Sinner. Days since I've been used to promote hate. Okay, not so funny. It says here you are an atheist. Was. Even my atheist friends love that, so it's okay. One of you is going to betray me. Can you tell which one? It's the cat. We also got the money. Oh, reverse rapture. I thought, wouldn't it be funny? Wouldn't it be funny if our clothes were taken and we were left? Remember when you used to let me drive? How holy you think you are, how much of a dick you are. That's true. That's also drawn from my own personal life when I was going through this real intense spiritual time, and I was meditating all the time, and I was reading all the time, and I was writing in my journal. I was going to retreats. I was going to monasteries. And Lisa just came out one day and says, you know, the harder you try to be spiritual, you're just more of a dick. So I thank God for Lisa. This is where I walked beside you, and this is where I dragged your ass. That's also my story. What's your spiritual gift? Swearing. Dear God, I can't believe how popular this one is, but I can't sell it as a print, but I can sell it on mugs because you can just have it in the privacy of your home. You know, people won't wear it on a t-shirt, but they'll have it on a mug when they're having their morning coffee all by themselves. And this apparently expresses a lot of our experience. Oh, there's that one again. Oh, this is Jesus at an art museum looking at a portrait. Oh, Lord, please make me more like Jesus. Oh, crap. God in Google Maps, you are here. That's decentering too. We welcome short people. That says a lot about a lot of people. He descended into hell. I've been at church meetings. I know what I'm talking about. Oh, this one is another Christmas one. The camel says, I'll bear him gifts. The donkey says, I'll carry him. The fish will pay taxes. The cow will provide milk, quench his thirst. The dove says, I will bless his baptism. I will feed him, the chicken says, with eggs. I will warm him, the sheep says. And the pig says, I will let him fill me with demons, then I'll jump off a cliff and wait. What? Pigs always get a bad rap in the... So God, why do you come with so much baggage? This is your, not mine. I love this cartoon. It's kind of smart because it's about projection, right? we're going to have to remove your butt. The guy going into surgery. God loves you, but. I have to put this on before I can go in. Jesus says, I have to put this on. I like this one because the rainbow sheep is drawing a large picture of the church, including everyone. Meanwhile, the straight white cisgender sheep are drawing a smaller church inside that one. I like this one. I think it's clever, if I must say so myself, because this is my point, is that the LGBTQIA aren't interested in grabbing the center, but sharing it. We have the living water. No, we have the living water. No, we have the living water. Meanwhile, they're all in the same water table. I think this last one, he's got a beer mug. I think he's Lutheran. I think that's it. Yes. So thank you very much.
I just want to say to everybody, we're so glad you came. There's some time to ask a couple questions. I have to go to class because I'm teaching, and so I need you to come over because I need to sell. Oh. What's out there? I have to sell. There you go. Thank you so much. I have to teach people how to preach.
Tell them to use pictures. Yeah, use illustrations. We do have time for a couple of questions, and then we'll have a reception in the space. Both Dr. Smallwood and David will be seated at a table here with their books and some prints. It's all free. There are suggested donations. If you can afford to pay for one and take one, or if you can afford to pay for 5 and take one, that would be nice too, so that others of us who might be on a budget, can be able to enjoy them as well. So any questions for David? I'll get out of the way. You please use the mic.
Yeah, anybody have a question about anything? That's good. Great.